That being said, let's get into our first topic. No fluff allowed. The Clone Wars. Danny, have you seen the Clone Wars?
I've seen the Tartakovsky one, but
not the Dave Filoni episodic one. Okay, so this is going to be the majority of me and Matt trying to convince you guys to watch that show.
Yeah, because I know enough about it to talk about it.
Okay, good.
Because I haven't had time to watch the whole thing, but I've gleaned things about the characters and the storylines and stuff. So.
Okay, cool. So I'll just start and I'll toss it off to you, Matt, in a little bit. But
good.
Yeah,
I'm a wealth of information.
When I watched the show when it first came out, I didn't like it. I thought it was way too childish for me.
The first season's kind of
the first season is very, very childish.
So I saw the movie. I took my kid to see the movie version, I guess, that's like the series. And I think I told you guys this before. The narrator was a real turnoff for me.
The movie version's kind of like the start of the show proper, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's like a precursor for the show. It sets up what the show is going to be about in a movie.
Well, they had like a couple seasons of the show in the bag, and then the movie came out, and that's when they actually started taking the show more seriously, I think.
Yeah.
So the movie kind of launched the harder core storylines for the show.
Yeah.
I thought the movie came out before the series.
It did.
Yeah.
Didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying is they had the show like animated and ready to go.
No, I could have sworn that the first season of the Clone Wars came out before the movie.
No. The movie came out.
Movie came out first.
Really?
Definitely, movie came out first.
Yeah.
Because I went and saw the movie in the theater, and I thought that the show had been on for a while. So. But how about that Zero the Hutt voice?
There's some this show is aimed at a certain demographic that's very young. So I can't blame it for that. I'm not criticizing for that. It just wasn't my thing. I was like, I'm not really into this, so I won't watch it. So I went like years. I never watched the show. I kept hearing people say, oh, Clone Wars is so good. Clone Wars is so good. I'm like, yeah, all right. It's good for a kid's show, right?
I never considered it a kid's show.
No?
No.
Oh, it's very, like the first 3 seasons, I think, are aimed at very young audience.
10-year-old plus.
Yeah. That's kids. That's a kid. That's a child. 10 years old. Babies.
Well, he also said plus, so above 10.
I don't know. I thought it was super like cheesy and corny and kind of like childish. So I didn't really.
The thing with me was I didn't like the prequels. I don't like that era. I'm not interested in any of the stories that happened in that era. So like I was never very interested in that show to begin with. I wanted more original series era stuff.
Yeah. I agreed with you for a long while, but then I started hearing these rumors like later on in the seasons, like 4 or 5 seasons in, that people were like, dude, the show makes the prequels better. And I was like, what? No way. And I started watching it, and I skipped the first 3 seasons because somebody that had watched it for like knew who my style was and knew what I would like and what I didn't like. And they were just start at season 3 and pick up from there, and you'll be fine.
Didn't it, because, gosh, that movie came out like 15, 16 years ago or something.
Yeah, it was like 2006, right?
Or something.
It was right after Revenge of the Sith.
It was a long time ago. But I've had a bunch of people like, well, first of all, before I get into that, didn't it stop for a while?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It stopped at season 5, and then Netflix picked up season 7, and then it stopped again for a long time, and then they just dropped season 7.
Yeah, because I've had quite a few friends who are like, man, like you've got to watch this last season's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I have watched the last season that they just put out on Disney Plus, and
Didn't they just drop the finale of it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you watch that already?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's good. It's good. I mean, again, you have to kind of go into it like. I think one of the early criticisms of the show was Ahsoka Tano. Like, she was not well liked when the show first started, and she was kind of annoying. You know, she was that like twerpy little teenage girl in the show that nobody liked, but her character arc and her growth through the last 15 years or so is one of the best stories I've ever seen.
I mean, the show's pretty much based around her.
Yeah.
So like,
it's her story.
She's not in any of the movies. Nothing else. Like, does she die in this finale? I mean, like,
I can't tell you that.
Why not? I don't give a
No.
Spoiler alert, she lives.
Yeah, she lives. No, she's alive.
Okay.
It's just cool because, I mean, it was kind of an odd thing because you never really consider Anakin as being somebody who had a Padawan.
Yeah,
but
he's never became a master.
Yeah, but Dave Filoni and George Lucas both worked hand in hand on this TV show, and with George Lucas's blessing, they were like, we're going to give Anakin a Padawan.
Also, Ahsoka showed up in Rebels, so it's kind of obvious that she's not going to die in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. The tension is kind of gone because we know where she ends up.
Same thing for Darth Maul too, where I know that in this season they had like this big epic fight between Maul and Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And it's just like neither of them are going to die. They're still around.
Well, the only reason I knew Maul was still around, we'll talk about it later, was because of the movie Solo. And then I had like, what the hell is that? And they're like, all my friends are like,
that was your reveal?
yeah, they were like, no, that's referencing the Clone Wars cartoon.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That was my reveal too. Like,
Was it?
Yeah, because I'd never watched the Clone Wars,
man.
and so like when Maul showed up in Solo, I was like,
What the? Yeah.
Yeah.
He got cut in half and thrown down the well.
Yeah.
So last week we talked about everything that we didn't like about, like, we hated that Darth Maul died because it would have been so cool to see him kind of go through the prequel trilogy as like the main bad guy. Well, I think, in my opinion, everything that we have gripes with about the prequel trilogy more or less gets either addressed and or band-aided in the Clone Wars series.
Would you say they go as far as to retcon it in the Clone Wars?
Maybe in some ways, because there's fights between people that in the prequel trilogy you kind of get the sense that it's the first time they ever met, but according to the cartoon they've met many times before. So like Dooku versus Obi-Wan and Anakin, it's implied that the last time they fought was in Attack of the Clones when Anakin gets his arm cut off.
Yeah.
But in the cartoon, which takes place between those two movies, they fight a ton. So it kind of, I wouldn't say it retcons
it's like Dooku and what's the robot guy's name?
Grievous.
They're characters throughout the whole series.
And they're also two different characters. I'll try not to make that mistake again this week.
Yeah, so I like all these grievances that we have about not knowing who these characters are, not having enough backstory in the movies, like all of that is addressed in this cartoon. And I think, honestly, again, I have to, in my personal opinion, after season 3 is when it gets really good. The storylines start getting really good. Anakin's not a whiny butthead anymore. He's more of a grown person who has his opinions and has his principles that he wants to stand by. And you can see him slowly turn to the dark side over the course of this entire series. And it's amazing. Like, it makes me appreciate the Revenge of the Sith so much more, because you're like, there actually is setup and precedence for him to actually turn that quickly. Like, one of the things I have a problem with Revenge of the Sith is like, he turns like that. Right? He's like, I'm a good guy, go murder kids. But if you watch the Clone Wars series and then you watch Revenge of the Sith, you're kind of like, I kind of see it. Like, he was primed and ready to go at that point.
So how many seasons of the show are there?
7.
So what we're saying is George Lucas is such a terrible writer that we need 7 seasons of a TV show.
pretty much. Yes.
Okay.
To make up for all the errors.
Yeah, right.
To make up for...
I didn't see it that way.
Is that too harsh? Well, I mean, George Lucas helped write the series.
This has got George Lucas all over it.
Yeah, it's everything we love about George Lucas.
He didn't write the series, though. Like, he was the guy, he produced it, so he'd come up with ideas with Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
And then Dave Filoni and his team would go out and write it.
Yeah.
So the fact that George Lucas did not write this show is one of the reasons why it's better than the movies.
Yeah, that's true. But George Lucas's strength has always been the world building. Like the
world
idea,
building,
man.
the
ideas.
ideas, exactly.
Here's my idea.
Although some of his ideas are suspect, like the Gungans and the Trade Federation and stuff like that.
But I mean, even in the Clone Wars show, like, Jar Jar is significantly less annoying. Although he is
Jar Jar's in it.
He's
that's why I said skip the first 3 seasons, because Jar Jar's he's peppered in there.
There are guides out there online to where it narrows it down to probably 25, 30 episodes throughout the whole series.
Please,
that you can watch those and get everything you need out of this series.
Yeah.
If any of your listeners at me on Twitter with that guide, because I don't want to watch.
Because there are episodes where they're like, I think there's one that's like Jar Jar and Padme based.
Oh yeah,
and it's just it's garbage.
There's filler episodes,
and there's like an R2 and 3PO episode or two in there sprinkled in. And that's terrible too. So it's like, let's see if the droids can get in trouble this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's aiming it towards its demographic. It's very childish. But
at the same time, there's some arcs in this series that are some of the deepest, darkest, craziest Star Wars you've ever seen.
Actually, I want to dive into that for a minute because I have some notes here. So instead of trying to like talk about the series as a whole, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of narrow down on some of the unique characters that the series introduced into the lore and some of the bigger storylines that the show kind of tackled. So the first we kind of touched on it was Ahsoka Tano, who is arguably she becomes the main character of the Clone Wars TV show. So what can you guys tell us about her?
Okay, so like I said, when we first get introduced her, and I think she was introduced in the movie first. And then she is in the very beginning of this show, and she's kind of annoying. She's she's cocky, she's a brat, she's kind of just that teenage girl that the character didn't quite work for me personally.
Wasn't she discovered by Plo Koon?
Yes, yeah, she was
as a child.
Yep, as a baby, she was discovered by Plo Koon, with the orange alien dude from the Jedi Council.
Yeah, with the weird
the weird face
eyes
mask
and
thing.
face mask.
Yeah, he's actually really cool. Again, some of these offshoot characters that we don't ever see in the prequels are in the show prominently, and they're awesome.
So since I've seen the movie but not the series, just to kind of help me get caught up, any of you guys watch Dragon Ball Z Super?
No, I do not.
Oh shoot. Okay, so because like they had this movie called like Battle of the Gods that I saw, but it was basically like it was like the whole first season of Super condensed into a movie, and then they just kind of expanded upon it. Is the movie kind of like season one? No, not at all. Okay, all right.
No, the movie kind of is like the pilot episode,
like the pilot
for the series, I guess. So Ahsoka, though, like she gets assigned to like I remember when she was first introduced, you think, oh, she's going to be Obi-Wan's Padawan, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, this is Anakin's Padawan. Yeah. And her and Anakin don't get along at first.
Yeah.
But over the course of the series, Anakin kind of learns to love and respect her, and actually like takes her under his wing.
There's a really great friendship that forms between them, and it helps flush out Anakin's character. And I don't have any complaints about Ahsoka anymore. Like even back when she was annoying, like I can go back and watch those episodes now, and I'm like, oh, I know where this leads, so it's easier to take.
But how did they
didn't
adequately?
He have a nickname for her?
What's that?
Didn't he have a nickname for her?
Snips, right? Yeah.
What was the story behind that?
I don't remember do you have it written down? Did you look it up?
I think it was just because like
she was so snippy,
she was
right?
So snippy.
Yeah, she would backtalk Anakin all the time, and he would get annoyed. So, but then again, that nickname that was started out as like a almost like a criticism became like a term of endearment.
Right. How do they explain or justify the fact that she's not mentioned at all in episode 3?
That's a pretty big part of the story.
Okay.
Yeah,
there's
actually a storyline that kind of explains that.
Okay.
So one of the things, and it's one of my personal favorite, I don't know if it's, I guess we're talking about Ahsoka, so we should talk about this, but my favorite arc for Ahsoka is later on, I think it's season 5. She is framed for a terrorist attack on the Jedi Council, on the Jedi Temple. Their bomb goes off and kills a bunch of people inside there. Like they have like a hangar bay with a bunch of ships and stuff, and somebody sets up. And the whole there's like a good 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah, she's put on trial.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like she gets blamed for
Anakin's like the only one who believes she didn't do it.
And yeah, this is really cool. So this is the part that like really makes me feel like Anakin is flushed out in this show too, is because Ahsoka gets framed for this bombing by a third party, by somebody else. And she knows she's innocent, but the Jedi Council is convinced that she's the one who did it, and they start going after her. Like they put her on trial in front of the Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. They've got her like locked up in jail. Like she's in a bad spot. And Anakin's pissed because he's like, look, guys, she didn't do this. This doesn't make any sense. You guys are completely blinded by this anecdotal evidence, and you're putting it on her, and you can kind of see the anger and mistrust building in Anakin for the Jedi Council because of it throughout these 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah, and this is the storyline that really so it makes once she gets cleared, it makes Ahsoka walk away from the Jedi Order.
Damn it, Matt.
And Anakin, and it
I was gonna say that.
It also explains why Anakin, like in Revenge of the Sith, why he hates the Jedi so much.
Yeah.
Is because they were responsible for him losing this connection he had with his Padawan.
Yeah. So Ahsoka, after she clears her name, and the Jedi are like, Yoda, I think, confronts her and says, we apologize. We're sorry that we did that to you. We made a mistake. Please, come back to the Jedi, and we'll allow you back into the fold. And she was like, no. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's like, no, I'm not coming back. I'm leaving. You guys.
Yeah. But that's also
how that bridge.
That's how she escaped Order 66.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why she escaped it. But I was like, that for me, when I was watching that show, like that was one of the best freaking storylines. I was like, damn, that's deep. Like that is dark. And then Anakin and Ahsoka talk, and she's like, I'm leaving, and he's like begging her, like, please don't leave me here alone, basically, because she was one of his only friends. And she's like, I'm sorry, I have to do this. And he's like, I understand completely. I've wanted to walk away for a while. and it was like, damn.
And this sounds like something I might like to watch.
right.
It's a really good.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other major characters.
Okay.
Here. So a big one is this character named Asajj Ventress, who was Dooku's apprentice, unbeknownst to Palpatine.
Yep.
And she was kind of like one of the early, like, kind of direct bad guys in the show. And
She's a badass in the Cartoon Network series from 2003.
Yeah.
She continues to be a badass in the show.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool.
and her storyline gets kind of broadened out into the whole Night Sisters arc, and they introduce this whole Night Sister aspect to the show, and so like there's a lot of interesting stuff for Asajj. What can you guys tell us about her?
The thing that I take away from her, I'm not like the hugest fan of her. I think she's cool in a way, but it wasn't a character that I really got attached to. But what I liked about her story is that Night Sisters, kind of like this little side quest thing that they had during this show, where it kind of flushed out the galaxy a little bit and realized that it's not just Sith, dark side, Jedi, light side of the Force. There's like this weird middle ground, and these Night Sisters aren't necessarily Force sensitive, but they use the Force as a tool. And they do some kind of like weird witchcraft thing, but it was really cool because she's a member of this Night Sisters organization, and she actually has a pretty tight connection to Darth Maul and where he comes from, because he's connected to the Night Sisters.
Same planet.
Yeah, same planet.
They're the Night Brothers, right?
Yeah, but it's a very weird, like tribalistic kind of society where the men are off doing their own thing and the women are off doing their own thing, and they very rarely kind of interact. But it was a really cool connection. It flushed out like an origin story for Darth Maul, which I thought was really cool.
So I have another question. I'm sorry, but I really love the Tartakovsky one. So like, is that one just not canon anymore, or did they like redo some of the same stuff with the same characters from that one? Like, like where Anakin goes into the cave and he like, they paint his face and he like has the vision.
I haven't watched that.
Well,
I have the DVDs you need.
The ones you're talking about, like those are so short. I think they're like 5 minutes each, something like that.
But they made so many of them. Like when they put the DVDs together, they're
but
decently long.
I honestly think that those weren't considered when they were making the actual show. I think those were.
I think they kind of use those as
so good
concept pieces for some of the characters and stuff that were put in this series.
But going along with the Night Sisters, so we had like that's how Darth Maul got reintroduced into the series, because they have the Night Brothers, and Darth Maul's brother was a character named Savage Opress, Savage Opress,
Savage Opress,
and he was like a character that the Night Sisters brought into their circle, and they were like, you need to go train under your brother who's still alive, and that was like the big reveal that Darth Maul
came back. So what had happened in this show, how they kind of reintroduced Darth Maul, which again is one of the things that we all kind of wish, like, man, we wish Darth Maul didn't die so early. Like, oh, really? Okay, well, here you go.
There you go.
So what happened is he fell into that giant hole, which happened to be some kind of like a trash compactor type thing, and he got kind of like how Luke fell in the Cloud City thing. He got sucked into like a tube. And it took him somewhere. And he was cut in half, but it was cauterized, so he didn't die. Right. He ended up on some giant planet with those, just basically garbage planet. Like everybody in the galaxy just takes their garbage to this one planet and drops it there.
Oh, how nice!
So he ended up being there for years, alive, and he like constructed some wacky, crazy like spider leg body. Yeah, cool. It was weird, and he went nuts. Like he legitimately lost his mind. His horns grew out. Yeah, his horns grew like super long. Like he was crazy looking.
Anybody knows the episode of that, at me on Twitter. I'll watch these a la carte.
Yeah, then so Savage finds him, and takes him back to the Night Sisters, and the Night Sisters do their magic mumbo jumbo on him and get his mind back and give him some cool new mechanical legs. And
which honestly, I mean, I like his later leg, the ones he gets later on. I didn't like his like weird like horse legs that he had.
I like how he looked in Solo. Yeah. I really wish that movie would have done better, because I would have loved, because they probably would have brought him in.
We're going to talk about
for like a sequel.
We're going to talk about it in a minute.
So did his legs end up looking like they did in that movie?
Yes,
then? Okay.
Eventually, yes. Like he kind of goes through like a good evolution where he's like this giant weird spider monster.
Here's a picture of him when he finally find him.
What? It's like some crazy scorpion spider.
Yeah, it's crazy, dude. Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, so he goes through a really fascinating arc too, where he kind of he is betrayed by Palpatine, so he has kind of like this animosity towards him and the dark side and Sith and all that stuff. But he still he's still a Sith at heart. So he's constantly at odds with the Jedi and trying to like throw a wrench in all their plans. And he's used really well as a permanent antagonist to Obi-Wan Kenobi.
And we also see him kind of the rise of the Crimson Dawn crime syndicate through this series as well, which plays into Solo later on.
So somebody sent me a clip, a friend of mine, I think it was my buddy Steven, after I like popped so hard for the reveal at the end of Solo, where it was if this is from Clone Wars or Rebels, I don't know, I don't really know, but they were at a campfire just kind of talking like Darth Maul and Obi-Wan. Is that from?
Oh, that's from Rebels.
That is from Rebels.
So that was okay. So that's like the very, very, very end of his story, which I honestly loved it. I thought it was great because, of course,
I just saw the clip completely out of context, and it seemed like two old
there's
friends
a whole
just talking, and then they like.
That's a different show. Now we'd have to talk about Rebels, which is a completely different show, but it carries on Darth Maul's arc all the way to his death, which is in that scene that you're talking about.
And so another character kind of going along with the Maul stuff, which I found interesting, is Obi-Wan actually has a love interest to a certain extent in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And
it's actually pretty good too.
A big story in the Clone Wars is basically the Civil War of Mandalore and this whole like drama with Mandalore. And the Duchess of Mandalore, her name is Satine Kryze.
Yeah.
Kryze?
Satine. I don't know her last name, but I know her first name's Satine.
Yeah. And Obi-Wan has like this kind of on again, off again like relationship with her, where at a certain point, like if she had asked him to like be with her, he'd have left the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
And this also goes into him kind of understanding and in some ways overlooking Anakin and Padme, because he's like, well, if I had it to do over again, I might have chosen.
So that it flushes out the prequels. We're like, why doesn't Obi-Wan, like, obviously he knows that they're together. Yeah, exactly. He knows, and he's like, I wish I could have done that, because in this story, Satine ends up dying at Darth Maul's hands.
Oh.
And I'm spoiling the crap out of this show for you, man. I feel terrible.
It's fine.
still cool to
It's
watch,
like, no, I mean,
Darth Maul like literally kills her in front of him.
Yeah, in front of him, executes her, and it's just like this heartbreaking moment for Obi-Wan Kenobi, because he's like, God, that was the woman that I would have just dropped everything for.
so obviously he doesn't kill him there, but tell me there's like some epic fight scene.
Oh yeah.
See that?
Dude, Darth Maul is the permanent antagonist to Obi-Wan Kenobi throughout this entire show, and it's amazing.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
And speaking of good antagonists, so there's another character in that the Clone Wars introduces, a bounty hunter named Cad Bane.
Yeah, he's a cool character.
Yeah,
Cad?
Cad Bane, and he kind of specializes in fighting Jedi, doesn't he?
I don't know about specializes, but he holds his own.
He's kind of like a cowboy.
Yeah, he's definitely like Clint Eastwood with Boba Fett mixed.
Nice.
It's amazing. He's
That's
really
what I
cool.
like about Mandalorian. It's got that whole westerny feel.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Cad Bane very much fits that bill.
Okay.
And he's a really cool character.
He's a scoundrel.
Yeah, it's awesome. He backstabs everybody. He's like, I'm in it for me. I don't care about anybody else. It's awesome.
Isn't there like a story arc where Obi-Wan goes undercover as a bounty hunter?
Yeah.
And he kind of teams up with Cad Bane. And,
I don't remember what the
Boba Fett.
I don't remember what the end game was for that plan. But yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi actually goes through some like prosthetic surgery to change the way he looks, and he infiltrates the bounty hunter guild, and he has to do these jobs with these bounty hunters so that he can get. I think it's something to do with Dooku, right? I'm pretty sure. Do you remember?
I think the bounty weren't the bounty hunters supposed to, like, they were part of a conspiracy to kidnap Palpatine.
Yeah, there was something to do with kidnapping Palpatine, which is the reason why I think Dooku was actually the mastermind behind it all, because it was like double play or whatever. But yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi goes undercover with the bounty hunters. There's a cool arc there, and again, there's this really awesome betrayal that happens between Obi-Wan and Anakin, because in order to make this work, they had to fake Obi-Wan Kenobi's death. And Anakin thinks he's dead. And Anakin thinks he was killed by this person. And Anakin goes on a freaking revenge quest for like 4 or 5 episodes. He was pissed.
This sounds so
right?
good.
He's pulling off all the dark side tropes, man. Choking people.
Nice.
He's like, typically when he goes up against, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. when he goes up against people like Dooku and Asajj Press as like a full-fledged Jedi, he kind of holds back, and he gets his ass handed to him sometimes. But when he goes on this revenge quest because somebody killed Obi-Wan Kenobi, he kicks their ass. Like, 30 seconds or less, boom, Dooku, done.
Squash
Asajj
smash.
Ventress, done. Like you see Anakin be freaking Anakin, the most powerful Jedi ever. It was amazing.
But they do introduce a lot of
I'm
different.
getting excited.
They do introduce a lot of different bounty hunters in the show. Like there's a bounty hunter named Aura Singh, who was actually the one.
Oh, yeah.
One who trained Boba Fett.
Aura Singh is a callback to the original trilogy. She's a character that's been around for a very long time. She shows up in the Phantom Menace during the pod race scene where she's on the balcony and you see her and then you see the pod racers going.
She's just
past
kind of
her.
out in the middle of the
She's
desert.
out in the middle of the desert, nowhere. It's a nobody character, and if you weren't like a super nerd, you'd never know who she was. But she's a pretty prominent character in this, and she's actually the one I think. I don't know if it's Rebels or Clone Wars, but she actually ends up training Boba Fett as a child to become a bounty hunter. It's cool. Yeah, there's all these cool little threads that
So this would be after Jango Fett gets.
after
Yes.
this,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so basically Boba Fett's going on a revenge quest against Mace Windu. And he kind of falls in with Aura Singh, and she takes him under his wing and trains him to be a bounty hunter.
Nice.
So basically all of Boba Fett's skill, it doesn't come from Django, it comes from this character.
Yeah,
Aura Singh.
Aura Singh and a couple other. I think Bosch is there too, right?
Bosk,
Bosk.
maybe.
I think he's there. It's what's his?
I like to call him Boss K.
Boss K. Somebody of his species is along in that crew that it's teaching Boba Fett how to be a bounty hunter. I don't know if it's actually him or not. It might be. I'd have to look again.
Now, another major character that the Clone Wars introduced that actually is relevant to our talk later on in this podcast is Saw Gerrera. He's introduced in season 5.
Okay, I thought he was from Rebels. So
He's in Rebels also.
Yeah, he's basically, so George Lucas came up with this character originally for the defunct live action Star Wars series that he was working on. And when that didn't go through, he kind of handed the character over to Dave Filoni. And Filoni kind of took George's concepts and ran with it for a good, I think it was called the Onderon arc. It was 4 episodes in season 5. And so it introduces Saw Gerrera, and it shows you the death of his sister and how Ahsoka and Anakin played in with that and stuff like that. And it really goes into his motivation as to why he wants to become a rebel. And it culminates in Rogue One, where we see his death
God, that's such a good movie. I
and
love that scene.
We'll talk about it in a minute.
and his transformation into basically the rebellion's version of Darth Vader.
Yeah, he's like the extremist, and,
Yeah.
and it kind of explains how he became like that. And we get introduced to him in Clone Wars, and then later on in Rebels, he's still around.
So when we first meet him, I assume he has all of his body parts, right?
Yes, yeah, he's a young man,
Okay.
and he's trying to liberate his planet from the Trade Federation.
And he learned all of his kind of guerrilla techniques from the Jedi who came and trained them in that episode.
Yeah, if you remember the episode from The Mandalorian where they go to that little farm area and they train all the farmers on how to
Yeah.
fight, that's how this starts. It
Okay.
starts out with the Jedi coming and teaching all these farmers how to fight, and then those farmers become terrorists and extremists, and they go so far, and then you follow him through the thread of his life.
Yeah, and George's whole concept was that these little cells they were trained to resist the separatists, across the galaxy. These are what eventually become the things that Mon Mothma and Bail Organa weave together to form the initial rebellion. All these kind of disparate guerrilla fighters who were trained during the Clone Wars, which I thought was kind of interesting. But so those were the big characters in the Clone Wars that I thought were kind of relevant. But there are actually some bigger story arcs that this show sets up that seem to be played out in greater detail in the larger Star Wars universe. Like, for instance, a big part of the Clone Wars is the Mandalore storyline. And in the Mandalore storyline, they introduced this sect called the Death Watch, which are these Mandalorian warriors that are in blue armor, and they're led by this guy who has the dark saber, and they kind of explain what the dark saber is. But if you've watched the Mandalorian TV show on Disney Plus, Death Watch is actually the group that saves the main character. I forget his name. I just call him Mandalorian. But saves Mandalorian when he's a kid. And I didn't know this when I first saw the Mandalorian. I just thought, oh, those Mandalorians are wearing blue armor. But in researching for this episode, I realized that Death Watch was like this is a direct tie-in to the Clone Wars.
So Jango Fett was wearing blue armor, wasn't he?
It was not the same.
Not the same.
It's brought up in the show. I can't remember what season it is, but somebody actually specifically asks about Jango, and what it comes down to. I kind of feel like it got done dirty by the writers, but they were like, Jango's not a Mandalorian. We don't know where he got that armor from, but he's not associated with us. And I was like, damn,
that's shitty.
Yeah, they threw him under the bus.
Same's true for Boba Fett, though.
Yeah, Boba Fett's the same thing. Yeah, he's not an actual Mandalorian. He just has the armor somehow. I always assumed that he just took his father's armor and like painted it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I was like, man, Jango got done dirty.
But the whole
that sucks.
Mandalorian Civil War and Siege of Mandalore and stuff like that.
Dude, Dave
that's
Filoni and Jon Favreau doing Mandalorian storylines is like peak Star Wars right now.
Oh,
it's amazing.
yeah, no, I love it.
And those guys love that storyline, and it's such a rich history. They can literally go anywhere in time and write an awesome story.
I just love the overall vibe of Mandalorian. It's just very Clint Eastwood kind of feel.
The whole Western motif.
Did you, Matt? You haven't talked in a while. Do you?
I don't need to.
Okay.
You guys got it covered pretty good.
Well, let me ask you this, Matt. So one of the weirdest storylines in the Clone Wars, I thought, was the Mortis.
I can't even begin to talk about
that's
that. That's some weird stuff, and it's some deep stuff. And I mean, Alex has done an entire series of podcasts on that, and they barely scratch the surface of that thing, man.
Well, just to give people who may not have watched the show some context, so like there's this weird diamond-shaped planet called Mortis, and it houses like the three original embodiments of the Force, which is the Father, the Son, and the Daughter. And the Daughter's all light side, the Son's all dark side, and the Father's kind of like the fulcrum between them that keeps them balanced. And I guess in the storyline, Anakin somehow finds his way there, and the Father is like slowly dying, and so like he wants the chosen one, aka Anakin, to kind of take his place, and they end up like the Son kills the Daughter, and then the Father sets it up so that Anakin can kill the Son, and then the Father dies, and so they're all dead. But like the whole Mortis thing, it actually played into Rise of Skywalker, because originally the rumor was that Matt Smith, who was supposed to be the villain in Rise of Skywalker before they rewrote everything, was going to play the son of Mortis. In that was kind of like the rumor. So like I haven't watched the Mortis story arc, but from what I understand, it's really out there.
We don't have enough time.
Yeah, we really don't. And I'm honestly, I do the Scare of Scuttlebutt podcast over there with Ro, and it's a dedicated Star Wars podcast. And when this subject came up, I couldn't hang. I'm like, this is way above my nerd level, man. Like, there's people who legit like break this stuff down, like like really particular way that makes sense, but I can't do it. I watched that episode. I'm so confused. I don't know what it means. All I know is that like the whole idea that Anakin was going to take over as like the embodiment of the Force, and like he has this vision where he sees his future and Darth Vader's above him in the clouds, and he's like murdering people, and he's freaking out. He's like, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? And the Father's like, this is your life, and he's like, no.
Yeah. And then they wipe his mind.
Yeah, and then they erase his memory so he doesn't remember it. It's freaking bonkers. Ahsoka turns to the dark side for like one episode where she's complete legit Sith. She's got red eyes and everything. It's freaking weird, dude. It goes way, way left field into the deeper inner workings of the Force.
You know roughly what season this is?
6, right? I want to say 6. Is it earlier than that? I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. Just look up Mortis arc, and it'll tell you where to go.
And in addition to the Mortis storyline, there's the whole like Shaman of the Wills, Wellspring of the Force thing, where Yoda goes on this quest to unlock the whole like Force ghost power, and he meets the Shaman of the Wills, who I guess was the one who figured this power out, and he eventually splits into like 5 different shamans and communes with Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah. Liam Neeson came back.
Liam Neeson came back to do the voice of Qui-Gon.
Oh wow, 3rd season.
It's in the 3rd season.
Yeah,
damn, that show went deep quick.
Yeah, it's the 16th episode of Clone Wars.
Wow. But Clone Wars seems to like to play with the Force mythos a lot.
And honestly, I don't really like. I like my Force like original trilogy, black and white, good guys, bad guys. Like that's my bread and butter, and that's what I like. The Clone Wars is like, no, screw you. It's deeper than that.
There's many shades.
Yeah,
of gray.
there's like many shades.
I don't need midi chlorines. I don't need the Mortis arc. I just keep it simple.
Yeah, I like to keep it simple too. But if you're into that kind of thing, the show goes deep.
And another thing the show goes deep into is the actual clone warriors.
Awesome.
You know,
Oh yeah.
and there's this whole like storyline with the Bad Batch and the Order 66 conspiracy.
Yep.
And, I think there was a character named Fives who kind of stumbles on the fact that all the clones have these chips in their heads that make them execute Jedi.
Fives is one of the clones. He's part of the original 501st members who are under Anakin. And Anakin has like this great friendship with all of his clone troopers, and they all have names, they all have personalities. They're voiced by the same voice actor. That's just fantastic because he makes all these subtle little changes to differentiate all the clones. But Fives ends up going a little crazy, and his chip malfunctions, and he executes Order 66 before he's supposed to. So he kills a Jedi before.
No, that's a different.
That wasn't Fives.
That wasn't Fives. Fives was there when it happened, and he discovers why it happened.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you hadn't watched it, but he had.
Well,
I might be getting the names confused.
I've refreshed my memory for this episode. So basically, what happens is a clone trooper, his chip malfunctions and he kills a Jedi in front of like all the others, and everyone just kind of dismisses it. But Fives kind of digs deeper into why it happened, and he discovers that there's this conspiracy where all the clone troopers have this chip in their heads that make them execute Jedi when a specific order is given. And he tries to warn Anakin and his commander Rex about it, and he gets assassinated before it can happen. But there's this whole like kind of race against the clock conspiracy theory like storyline where he's like trying to uncover what this is about, and then he's trying to expose it, and you know how he like if he had just been able to like tell them, you know, like a split second before he gets killed, like the whole landscape of what happened in Revenge of the Sith would have changed and stuff like that.
Now, it just reminds me, as a side note, just to be, because I'm a dad or whatever. So we had pest control guys come over the other day, and my son, he's fucking adorable. He goes, Dad, Dad, can I tell him? And I was like, tell them what? Execute Order 66. I was like, go for it, buddy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you know, it's funny. The Clone Wars do have like some really interesting, in-depth storyline and characters that have really kind of, you know, deepened and expanded the Star Wars mythos.
We get introduced to a young Tarkin as a commander of the Republic. It's really cool. He has a lot of interaction.
Yeah, he was the prosecutor in Ahsoka Tano's trial. Yep. So he was even a bad guy back then.
Yeah, he's legit. He's Tarkin. He feels like Tarkin. Oh, yeah. He's just a younger version, and it's really cool. And he has a ton of interaction with Anakin, which I thought it was really cool because it's never really brought up very often, the relationship between Vader and Tarkin, but it gets flushed out in here, and I'm convinced that he knows Vader was Anakin at one point.
Yeah. So how long are these episodes?
30 minutes.
No, they're like 20.
20?
Are they even less than that?
Yeah. How many per season would you say?
What's that?
How many episodes per season would you say?
I have no idea.
No,
probably like 15, maybe 10.
I'd have to. Yeah, probably. No,
I binged them, so I never paid attention. I don't even remember what season.
I guess the reason I'm asking is I have this big project I'm about to do, and I'll usually have just something on, and I'm just wondering if I should just do the key episode thing or just say fuck it and
just turn it on.
Just turn it on and watch it. Yeah. It's all on Disney Plus. It's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are moments where you're going to want to actually pay attention because it's one of these arcs that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it was funny, like when we were watching Mandalorian, you know, me and Vader would have conversations about it, and he'd talk about how the Mandalorian show is written just like the Clone Wars, because like Filoni just has the style of how he likes to write like these kind of like throwaway episodes, and then he'll have like one really in depth, like super good like lore episode, and you know, kind of go off from there.
It goes back and forth between like fluff episodes and just like hardcore, like deep conversations.
So like
about
in the Mandalorian, you're like when the bad guy pulls out the dark saber. And you're like, no, wait a second. The last time I saw the dark saber, this person had it back in the Clone Wars episode, blah, blah, blah. You know, and you're like,
on Mandalore.
What's going on?
Yeah, there's a huge backstory with the dark saber and what it means.
And the dark saber's what was basically the last shot of Mandalorian, right?
Yeah.
Where the sword.
So the dark saber is generally possessed by the person who's running Mandalore, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a deep history of it. Basically, it was long, long ago, a Mandalorian had actually become a Jedi, and their lightsaber that they had created was the dark saber.
Basically, it's Excalibur.
Yeah.
And they go into this in Clone Wars.
Yes. Okay. And Rebels too.
But no, it's mostly Rebels.
It's mostly Rebels, but it's mentioned in Clone Wars.
Yeah, like the guy who wields the Darksaber is the leader of the Death Watch in Clone Wars.
So chronologically, does Rebels come before or after?
Rebels is
between episodes 2 and 3.
No.
So isn't that what Clone Wars is?
No, Rebels is between episodes 3 and 4.
Oh, no,
Okay, so it's after
Clone Wars.
then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just Clone Wars is between episodes 2 and 3.
Episode 1.
Rebels is right between episodes
What,
3 and 4.
New Hope and Empire Strikes Back?
No,
Nothing in that.
No.
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. Okay.
Okay, so just
Whereas Clone
just to-
Wars is between 2 and 3.
Just
Yeah,
to get it
between
clear.
Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Just to
just I'm probably jumping ahead. I don't know, but this last 4-part arc was purposely tied into episode 3.
Oh yeah.
It plays concurrently with the events that are going on in
Yep.
Revenge of the Sith.
We see
It's incredible.
Yeah, in season 7, the latest one that just came out that just finished. It's a storyline about it's after Ahsoka has left the Jedi, and she ends up hooking up with the Death Watch people, and she is trying to take Mandalore back from Darth Maul, who at the time had kind of put a siege on Mandalore, and he is basically the de facto leader of the Mandalorians. Ahsoka and the Death Watch go to try and take Mandalore back from Maul, and during this time, we meet up with Obi-Wan and Anakin. We watch them get the order to go and rescue the Chancellor or the Emperor. I guess it's just Chancellor at this point.
Yeah.
From Grievous on the ship. That's the opening of episode 3.
Yeah.
And then while Ahsoka is fighting Vader.
Which mean Dooku? Dooku's the one that's got him in that chamber.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then while Ahsoka is fighting Maul and working with Death Watch to take Mandalore back, the events of episode 3 happen where Order 66 and all that stuff happens, and we see it from Ahsoka's perspective where her clone troopers turn on her. Oh. And it's really cool.
So, but Mandalorian, just kind of help me with my timeline, that takes place
After
Return
6.
of the Jedi.
Yes.
Plenty before Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
6 years after Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
So it's actually.
I can't wait to see next season with Ahsoka and that. Man.
But watching The Mandalorian and having never watched the Clone Wars, I was kind of like confused about certain aspects of it because I didn't have all the details on like Mandalore and what the Mandalorians were and stuff like that. So I was kind of watching it cold. And if you are familiar with the Clone Wars and Rebels, I think you get a lot more out of the Mandalorian than if you've never watched it.
100%. Yeah. Dave Filoni is so freaking good at like putting these little nuggets of gold in between all these episodes and then paying it off like in the end. It's awesome how he does it.
And another great thing about, not to keep harping on Mandalorian, but it kind of ties in with the Clone Wars, is that, it was always kind of curious to me why people look down on droids so much in like the, original trilogy, like episode 4.
Yeah. We don't serve their kind here.
and the Mandalorian where he just like doesn't trust droids. And, you forget that there's like this whole era that just ended where robots were the ones that were like causing all the
murdering people.
Murder and
yeah,
chaos.
like Phantom Menace, like all of the droid army.
Yeah, so it gives a little bit of context as to why everybody kind of doesn't like droids.
And when you see like the flashbacks of the Mandalorian where he's like a kid and the battle droids are like ravaging his planet, and it's like, oh, now I understand why he distrusts droids so much and stuff like that. Because to us, like droids are C-3PO and R2-D2 and these like kind of benevolent like helpers, but you forget that like for so many people in this universe, there was like an entire generation that were terrorized by
it was
droids.
how long? The Clone Wars was like what, like 10 years or something, or at least 5, I think, right? So for 5 or 10 years of people who were children during the original trilogy, or during the prequel trilogy, they were kids, and then they grew up to be adults in the original trilogy era. They were all mistrusting
I think
droids.
Ahsoka was supposed to be 12 in the first movie, and she's 18 in this last episode.
According to this, the Clone Wars lasted 3 years, from the very first Battle of Geonosis and Attack of the Clones to the final battles on Utapau, Kashyyyk, Mandalore.
But the Separatist movement actually started like 10 years before that.
Yeah.
With Naboo. So like the droid army concept had been around for a long time, but it wasn't until the Clone Wars started that like the battles really started raging.